Welcome in, everybody. The man alongside me is Jayson Timpf, who's amazing. He does hoops tonight for the Volume. And going to do our little foray for the next 30 minutes or so. That was obviously not resembling game one in the second half. You know, it was interesting I'll just give you kind of my minute spiel on this. So as I watched the first half, once again, the refs were allowing a lot of physical play, which I do think bodes well for the Celtics over the long haul. But as I was watching the first half, I was saying, listen, if Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson aren't going to be here offensively in this series, you can't ask, Steph to be the shot maker because you're not getting anything from Draymond or Looney. Somebody's got to give Steph some help. And then in the second half, Jordan Poole delivers. I think Klay played pretty good defensive basketball. He's okay. He was fine. But I thought you saw a huge pullback on Marcus Smart offensively, Al Horford. And this should be noted. This is something we talk about. When Marcus Smart, he shoots like he averages 20 a game. He's a very confident guy. The second thing that jumps out to me is that's about as bad as Boston can play. They're hard to blow out because they play such good defense. So they didn't play Robert Williams much, Jason. So they made a decision pretty early is we're just going to get him healthy. Assignment done. We got a split. We're not going to play Robert Williams a ton. So I think you're going to get a very spirited effort by Boston in game three.
Through three halves, you could get this feeling like the game was just easier for Boston. And a huge part of it was that physicality you're talking about. So, a lot of times people focus on interior size, but I would argue in this era of NBA basketball that perimeter size is actually the most important element in the game. The reason why is more than ever, it's become important to cover ground, especially in rotation. So getting bigger athletes that are running around on the perimeter, they just take bigger steps. Like, guess what? If Jaylen Brown is closing out on a shooter, it's just different than if that's Jordan Poole or Klay Thompson closing out on a shooter. They're bigger, they're stronger. You've been big on this since game one. The physicality, hand checking's allowed both ways in this series. If you watch, it's hilarious how much fouling is taking place. There's a play in the first quarter.
It's incredible. Around the basket, they're letting everything go.
Yeah, it's outrageous. There was a fadeaway that Jaylen Brown took over the top of Draymond Green at the foul line, and they showed it on replay, and Jeff Van Gundy's like, look at this amazing defense from Draymond. I'm like, he fouled him 6 times on that possession, but it's like, I'm not mad about it because it's happening with everybody. And that dynamic through 3 halves was leaning heavily towards Boston. And so what was really interesting and I thought was really smart, I think it's probably Steve Kerr that kind of picked up on this. And he has been, I think, in all likelihood, the best halftime adjustments guy in this playoff field. I think when you hear things like, oh, who's the better third quarter team? The better third quarter team, that usually comes down to coaching. That comes down to a coach that can identify where your issues were in the first half, explain what needs to be done, and then they go out and execute. And I think Kerr understood, as is a very interesting psychological phenomenon that takes place with NBA officiating. The team that's at a disadvantage, whether it's on the scoreboard or in the series, is just going to get more leeway with officiating because that's just it's just human nature. I'm with you, Colin. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't believe anything's rigged, but I do think that naturally officiating gears towards the team that's at a disadvantage. I think Kerr came out at halftime and was like, I need you guys to beat them up back because they're going to let you because you're at a disadvantage. And they picked up that physicality in that third quarter. And all of a sudden, Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum weren't getting the dribble penetration that they were getting earlier. All of a sudden, they had a dominant quarter that was very similar to what Boston did to them in the fourth quarter of game one. And next thing you know, the series is tied. Even though you were probably the worst team for 3 of the halves to this point, just like that, you needed something to tip the dynamic. And you hit the nail on the head with Jordan Poole. This Golden State team desperately needed somebody to step up offensively because it was looking like Steph at the top and then like 4 Boston Celtics and then maybe Jordan Poole after that. They needed somebody to shift that dynamic, and today it was Jordan Poole. And Klay Thompson, even though he didn't have a massive scoring night, I thought he hit some big shots to start the third quarter that kind of just loosened things up a little bit for them.
Yeah, and I think Klay always gives you a really smart defensive effort. He's got his hands in the right places. Listen, both these teams, Wiggins missed about 6 chippies. Klay missed 3. Boston missed 20. It was not an artistic masterpiece. Most of the runs were on outside shots. I was like you. After 6 quarters, I thought to myself, well, Boston's 4 best players are all in their prime. Warriors' 4 best players are all out of it. It's something. It's not everything. It's something. Boston looks a little twitchier and a little quicker. I think game 3, I think you're going to get more Robert Williams. I really do think the Celtics came in here thinking, listen, let's just see how it goes. The minute it got out of hand, let's not worry about Robert Williams. Let's just, Al Horford, let's get him out of there. Robert Williams. So I'm interested to see the line in game 3 because I would favor the Celtics. But here's something now, Jason. So, when you go on the road, Boston has been a team when they're favored, like game 6 against Miami, they get tight. So now we go home and we all expect them to play great. They're 5-4 at home. I think it's their last 9 games are like 5-4 at home. So whereas tonight, in these first 6 quarters, it's a little bit of house money. There's not a lot of pressure. They're the underdog. It's at Chase. They tend to play really well and tough and scrappy as underdogs. Now they go home and we're like, oh, they were just humiliated. This is their game. They're not yet to me nearly as comfortable. Golden State's very comfortable. Sometimes too comfortable as a favorite. They get sloppy and smug. Golden State, Boston gets tight. They get a little tight. And this is we both know this. That's what young teams do. Until you've got the title, you're not something until you are. So I'm really interested to kind of see Boston now has home court, just got humiliated. Now they have to perform great. And now I think the series really gets interesting. Now to me, it really gets interesting. And I still lean slightly Golden State, but if the refs allow this, and I said this after game 1, if Robert Williams plays in 6 games and the refs allow this, it's a coin flip to me. It really is.
I feel like if Boston plays a certain way, they're going to win this series. The question for me is whether or not they're going to play that way. What I call it is, it's like, have you ever heard this expression, Colin? It's like being allergic to success. And it's just the kind of personality or the kind of groups or the kind of teams where when they're having success, they struggle to identify what's causing the success. So for instance, with Jayson Tatum tonight, Jayson Tatum had a nightmare shooting night in game 1, but I thought he played better basketball in game 1 because as much as he missed shots, he was engaged and physical on the defensive end. And most importantly, he understood that his role on this team with the way that Golden State is guarding them is to create the initial advantage. And the way that manifested was 13 assists. And I believe he only had 3 assists tonight. He was minus 36 and didn't play in the fourth quarter, which is an outrageous number. But it's because Tatum looked at it as like, I need to get going as a scorer in game 2. Whereas the reality is like, actually they were winning, even though if you just take that same set of shots you took, maybe you make a couple more, great, but you need to do exactly what you did in game 1. That's what I mean by allergic to success. It's like you're failing to understand that the reason why you had the advantage to begin with is the Celtics were getting into their drive and kick game and getting wide open shots out of that, but there was nowhere near, and Jaylen Brown had a rough night tonight. So it was even more important for Tatum to be the guy that could be that consistent force. But it's like, and then the other issue too here, Colin, is like, it's almost like the problem with being too talented as a skilled basketball player, where it's like you could see Tatum take these incredibly difficult jump shots, like sidestep jump shots, step back jump shots, turnaround jump shots. And it's the curse of being as talented as he is, because that counts as settling. Essentially meaning like you understand you have a physical advantage against somebody and you could physically press that advantage and get a high quality shot, but you also work a lot this summer on this nifty little step back and it looks pretty when it goes in and you can make it. And so you're staring at the guy and you're like, I could just take this step back. It'll be easier on my legs. Maybe it'll go in. And that to me is an example of that, the burden of almost too much talent. Like he got away from what was working for him in game one, which was slashing, getting into the paint, collapsing the defense, and getting everybody else going.
I almost feel if Jaylen Brown had Jayson Tatum's offensive talent and Tatum had Jaylen Brown's confidence, you'd have 2 stars. Like, I think Jaylen thinks he's a little better than he is, and Jayson doesn't know how good he is. And so, like there are nights that Jaylen's off, and I just want to say, pull back, but that's not who he is. He's super athletic. He believes he can score on anybody. Tatum's gifted, but you can see it. We talked about this after game one. If Jayson misses a couple shots, has a couple of bad times down the floor, he's much more willing to get rid of it. He's just not going to shoot through it, and that's just his personality. A couple other things that jumped out to me is I did think the Warriors got the whistle in the first half. It's going to way it's going to work. The other thing, though, if you're Boston, you have to feel pretty good. So if you watch the Celtics enough, they have these 6-minute lulls, even on good nights. And they had one tonight. But at one point they had it, and then they corrected, and they took the lead. It was in the first half, and I'm like, wow. Like, that's trouble for the Warriors. The problem is they had a second one in the third quarter, and you're like, you can't have 2 of those against the Warriors. But the thing that I think bodes well for Boston is when they have these 6 and 7 minute lulls, and the Warriors don't always have them, but the Warriors usually have them when they're motion. They don't move enough. They get very ISO, and that's when the Warriors are in trouble. And they're very talented, so sometimes they just get into watching Steph. But the Celtics get into this because if Tatum's not hitting, it's not a beautiful offensive team. Tonight they had 2 or 3 long stretches, but they usually don't. And I'll go back to this. In that first half, when they had a 6.5 minute lull, it didn't do much. They were down like 8, 9, and they got right back into it with a couple threes. They're not going to be this bad. This is the worst Boston's going to play. This will not happen again. And Jordan Poole's not going to hit 38-footers again. So I think if I look at the 8 quarters played, take out the fourth quarter of game 1 for the Celtics, take out the third quarter of game 2 for the Warriors. And my takeaway is something you said. I think Horford's better than he was tonight. I think we're pretty even on shot makers. Unless Clay goes to the next level, they both have about 3 or 4 guys that can make shots. And I think will Robert Williams remain healthy? Draymond doesn't get another technical. I think we're going to have a really close series. Takeout, tonight's 3rd, and game 1's 4th. It's a pretty good matchup. They got shot makers, both play really good defense, both have a star. My only tweak on the series is I think it may go 7.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we hoped this series would be. Finally 2 teams to where if they don't bring their best effort, they're going to get their butt kicked because you're playing against a team that's actually at your level. I'm with you. If you're a Boston fan tonight, and I'm with you, I'm not ready to jump off my Golden State pick. I was on Golden State in 7, and because I predicted this exact phenomenon, the Jekyll and Hyde Boston thing. When they look good, it looks like other teams are just completely swallowed up by their athleticism and their ability to play both ends of the floor. But then when they get sloppy on offense, they go through stretches where they look like they literally don't know what they're doing on offense. And then, I thought this was a textbook game from Golden State too, where they controlled all of the little details of basketball games that are all factored into what makes a good team. Like, for instance, they took better care of the basketball than Boston. Boston had 19 turnovers. The Warriors scored 33 points on those turnovers. Again, Colin, when you turn the basketball over and you don't give your defense a chance to get set, there's just a huge difference trying to get a stop against a team that's running at you when you are not set versus when you've scored the basketball or you got a quality shot and your defense was set so that now they can come down and they don't have an initial advantage. When you get a team like Boston in the half court, is going to have a big advantage in this series because of their physicality, because of their size. But if you can, as Golden State, get a third of your offense just by running up and down the floor for layups and wide open threes when they're throwing the ball away, you're going to have your opportunities there. But I'm with you. If you're Boston, you're going to go home in game 3. They're 3.5 point favorites right now in FanDuel. I expect them to play great
so the
in game
Celtics,
3.
Celtics are 3.5-point favorites.
Yes. And
Okay.
so the way I'm looking at that is I think that, to your point, Boston's not riding high anymore. They just got their butt kicked. You know they're going to come in and play with intensity and with focus. You know Tatum and Brown are going to bring it. I wouldn't be surprised if Boston won big in game 3, but then it's like we're going to be sitting here having a conversation and it's going to be like, what do you expect in game 4? I expect Boston to come out flat because they've done that time and time and time again throughout this playoff run. I thought just in general, them Golden State flipping that physicality dynamic was very good for them in that second half, but for the series, in all likelihood, that's an advantage that will stay in Boston's corner. If I'm hand checking you and I have an extra 20 pounds on muscle on you, my hand checks are going to do a better job of holding you in your spot than if you're skinnier and smaller than me and I'm driving on you. Even if you got your hands on me, I'm going to blow right through that. So I think over the course of the series, that advantage favors Boston, but kudos to Golden State for flipping it on them tonight.
Yeah, I thought if you're a Warrior fan, you have to feel good about Jordan Poole because he was completely ineffective in game 1 and mostly ineffective both sides of the floor in game 2 in the first half. And that's, as we started this, I said, this can't be just Steph. Like, Clay's not what he was. He's just not getting as good a looks. He doesn't, his movement's a little off. You know, 2 big injuries. It's a little off, not quite as quick, but he's always been a guy that shoots. You know, Clay is funny. Van Gundy was kind of criticizing him tonight for some of his shots, but Clay has got a lot of leaners. You know, he doesn't create his shot as well as like Steph or maybe a Tatum. So some of his shots are just ugly. He does a lot of leaners and a lot of them go in, but Jordan Poole's not going to hit as much as he hit tonight. They're going to need Jordan Poole to not freeze in the headlights in Boston because this defense, and you've seen it in probably, you know, of the 8 quarters, you've probably seen it in 5 to 5.5 to maybe 6 of them. They're making Boston take some off balance, hurried shots. There's a reason the Warriors are missing some gimmies when you have to hurry. You know, some of those with Wiggins, he's contested. He's got a hand in his face. So, you know, you can just say the Warriors are missing gimmies, but that's the reality of it. And for the record, Boston missing gimmies too, because Looney's a presence defensively and Draymond's a presence. So I didn't think either team, both left about 20 points on the table on little chippy stuff inside. But, you know, I think you and I both agree it's a long series. Celtics 3.5-point favorites. I like Boston. I think they win by about 5 or 6. I think Horford rebounds. You get a friendly whistle. I don't think Jordan Poole can duplicate some of his shots tonight. I do think Clay is going to play better. You know, my take is, as a franchise, they were kind of resting Robert Williams tonight. We're going to see what they got out of him. I think you'll have more minutes from Robert Williams, a better game from Al Horford, a better game from Marcus Smart. I think the Warriors pull back a little bit offensively. They won't be quite as hot. I'm going to take the Celtics by about 5 in game 3. Your thoughts?
So I actually expect Boston to win big in game 3 because I just think it'll be the wave of the crowd, the first NBA Finals game in Boston since 2010, right? There's going to be an incredible historic type of vibe in there. The Celtics facing a little bit of real adversity. You know, you were talking about Horford having a better game. Colin, our own Draymond Green, who, as you have said, and I agree, has the best sports podcast in America right now.
In the world.
In the world. In the film, when I was watching it, he was kind of like, you know, in the game when you're watching it live, you see what's happening, but you have to rewatch to really see what's happening, which I totally understand for you. You were way too busy of a man to just sit down tomorrow morning and watch 3 hours of Warriors Celtics again. But like on the film, Draymond was daring Horford to shoot. There wasn't even a closeout on most of them. Tonight, Al Horford, 0 3-point attempts. Draymond completely erased that factor from the game in one night. He said on his show he'd make the adjustment, and he did. And, you know, sometimes, especially for guys, there's a lot of guys like Al Horford and Derek White in particular, they'll shoot when they're open, And when they get a groove, they'll be a little more aggressive, but they're not gunners. So, like, if you can throw them a soft closeout, they won't even shoot. They'll just keep it moving. And that was an interesting example from Draymond tonight to flip that dynamic. But that said, Boston, 19 turnovers for 33 points tonight. That's something they'll clean up. Tatum and Brown both had rough nights. They're going to be better in game 3. I expect that physicality dynamic to flip back towards Boston. One of my favorite bets on FanDuel lately has been alternate spreads. I actually was on it tonight for Golden State because I expected them to win big, but I got them at minus 14.5 for like plus 400. That's going to be the kind of thing I'm going to be looking at in this game 3 spread, is what kind of odds we can get on an alternate spread in that 10 to 15 range. Because I think that in Golden State also with Steve Kerr, knowing they have some older guys and some guys that are dealing with some injuries, I could see him pulling the plug a little bit early too if the game is out of hand. So I expect Boston to win big in game 3, and then game 4 becomes the pivotal moment of the series. Does Boston put a second good effort together and put themselves in a big advantage, or do they let their foot off the gas? You had mentioned Jordan Poole. He's obviously the biggest swing factor. I'm with you. I don't think Clay's going to get it going. He's just not getting good shots. Like, it's not like we're sitting here watching Clay choke under the pressure. He, against this Boston defense, if it's him flying off a screen, it's still contested. His fadeaways are incredibly contested. He's had a handful of plays where he's gotten a layup attacking a closeout, but he's not getting good looks. Clay's not going to get going in this series unless Boston makes a lot of mistakes. But Jordan Poole is going to be the guy to watch. Steph has just become reliable. Like, you could just count on the guy to be a monster every single night, but they need something from Jordan Poole to steal one of these games in Boston.
All right, Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight. He'll break it down. We'll put it all over our stuff, all over the Volume. Please subscribe to the Volume Sports YouTube channel. It's left or right, one of those. All right, my man, good job. We're knotted at 1. Game 3 is Wednesday, same time, same place. Thanks, man.